Hi, good late afternoon to everybody. My name is Francesca Murialdo, and I teach interior design at the Politecnico of Milano. And that's the first thing. So I really appreciate the lecture made by Riccardo, because it's completely different point of view from the one I'm trying to talk about. First of all, it's a bit confusing, so I want to spend a couple of words about what is interior design, because to us, it's not really profession, because I am an architect, or I could be also a designer, but it's a different approach to spaces. And in the second part, I want to stress to you a little bit about adaptive reuse and contamination, that I think are two main concepts, very elastic, that can be used in many different contexts. I'm not talking about housing, because I really think that to inhabit today has such a different meaning that housing is just one of the way we can inhabit. We all work, most of the people do work, and so what actually happens is that we inhabit a lot of spaces at the same time, because we spend all day in the office, and we kind of inhabit that place. And in the last years, also residential spaces has been transformed a lot, because, for example, I think most of you have got a computer at home. So it's like saying you've got a little space, office space in your house. Thing that was not happening, not even like, 20 or 30 years ago. So things are been changing a lot. So first of all, click. Click col sinistro, yes. First of all, what is interior design? Or you can even say interior architecture. And we never say exterior architecture. So, and that's because interior design is not related to the inside skin of a house. So sometimes it's easier to say what it isn't, to understand what it is. So it's nothing about a scale or dimension of space. So an interior design, it's not like a flat, because it's a small scale, and a huge building can be designed as an interior. It's just a different way you focus on design. When you start making a project, you've got to choose, where to start from. And just to make it really easy, let's say you've got two main choices. First choice is to look what's happening in the city around you and to relate to the landscape, for example. So you think you've got to solve a problem, you've got to design a house, a museum, a library, whatever. You can take two main ways. First way is to relate to the city. Let's call the city, then it could be the village or the landscape, but like towards the exterior, and thinking about how the impact of that box building will have on the exterior. And the other way, it's thinking about the inside. So what are the expression of needs of people that's gonna inhabit that space, whatever is a house or an office. So, for example, this building that you probably may have seen before, it's a very famous museum. It's in Bilbao, and it's a Guggenheim museum. And it's a typical example of what I mean when I'm talking about relating with the outside. So in the last, let's say, maybe 15 years, Western cities, but also Eastern cities, has been more and more populated by huge iconic buildings that have to represent kind of the new cathedrals in a way. Instead of, well, you know very well here in Goa, you've got these huge churches that are like the main spots of a past historical thing. But the new ones are commercial. This is a museum, but still has got a very much commercial attitude. So the new cathedrals are these huge commercial boxes that try to communicate an image, special image of a city. That is very famous because Bilbao, that is an industrial city in the north of Spain, it hasn't been recognized as a very interesting city because it's been industrial. So tourists didn't go there. There was nothing really nice to see. But then they decide to rebrand rebranding the city, putting this huge kind of sculpture, let's say, to attract people. And this is one way of looking at things. Another way, it's looking things from the inside. And I think it's a very interesting topic. We've been talking before, some of you were at the previous debate, and we were talking about sustainability, because of course we are in this very nice environment in Goa. You're very lucky, because you still have something natural to preserve, and that is nature, basically. But like the concept of sustainability, it's not, from my point of view, it's not just related to the natural landscape, but it's not just related to save energy, but it's also very much related to the use of the things that we already have. So basically, what is actually happening, has been happening the last, let's say, 30 years in most of the European cities and American cities, is that production moved away. We used to have, even I come from Milano, and Milano used to be very much an industrial city, and we used to have huge factories. Then happened that globalization came everywhere, and so we just decided not to produce anymore because it's cheaper. We go and produce in China, as everybody. And the city has been empty because all these buildings that were built to solve a specific function, from one day to another, has been completely void, useless. And so started up a big discussion, like, what are we going to do? And sustainability is also a matter of using the structure that you have. Like this morning we were talking about the fact that you've got a lot of tourists, and probably you'll have more and more coming to Goa, and about the fact that a big issue now is to build up new buildings. And somebody from Goa was telling me that you do have a lot of space already built that you can actually use. Interior design, so it's not related to the inside as opposite from the outside, and hasn't got much to do with decoration. So it's just basically a different approach of designing from the inside of things. And it's basically focused on relationship between the men and women, of course, and space and behavior. And it tries to connect a lot of different disciplines. The main, of course, it's architecture, as it builds all the containers that we've got to transform. And it tries to combine an interdisciplinary approach to explore the evolution of living spaces. One of the main goals is to innovate, to create innovation, so try to understand what are the new needs of the people and trying to foresee what's going to happen in the future, because it's very difficult. I mean, you've got to have a vision of what's going to happen in the future to try to make a solution for the problems. So foresee, propose new models that can be developed in the future. And interpreter, so try to understand which are the problems in contemporary world, and try to make a solution. Like, this is a very simple solution, but of course, this is New York. So in a dense city as New York, where there's no space, a shelter on the top of a house, it's a solution to have an extra terrace. Otherwise, it's impossible to have. So it's very much true that we have this thing that we keep on saying, we have globalization. So we look all the same, we drive all the same, we have also the same children containers, all over the world. But it's also true that we still have very different cultural heritage. And the two things together can be mixed, so what we call glocal. So it's the global, we've got internet, we've got connection, we can travel. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to make it a bit short, otherwise we're gonna make it light. And so the global attitude, we have to try to get the good for that, because now we can travel. Like just 20 years ago it was really expensive, but now the young people can travel very easy. And we've got the internet. There is a virtual world you can communicate. And that's the good. And from the other side, we still have, the local heritage that we've got to mix with the global opportunities. So at the end, what I want to talk to you about today, it's adaptive reuse. That it's about re-functionalize what we do have already. That's why I was talking about sustainability. So it means to have a change in the program. The program is what we technically call a program is the function a building is built for. So if you want a house, the program will be residential. And we've got to make a little bit of change about that. The other thing is contamination. Contamination, it means to try to rethink the language we use. Language we use designing, it's very similar of the language we use speaking. So speaking, we've got words and we've got grammar that we put together to make a speech. And then it depends who am I talking with. And the same thing, it's like in architecture or design. We've got materials from one side, we've got technology from the other side, and we've got to try to make things. And the contamination of language with refunctionalization gives a very much change in use. So typology, I believe that typology today is not so an important concept as it has been before. So it's not so crucial to have, like, from one side residential, from the other side offices, from the other side commerce. But things are getting more linked one to the other. And this way of approaching, trying to re-functionalize things that we already have, it permitted what we call a smart growth, because we actually, and this hasn't got to do anything with conservation. I'm not talking about conservation. I'm not talking about churches or restoration at all. I'm just talking about taking building resources and transform them in new things. And reduce sprawl, of course. I'll just make some examples. Like, for example, this is a Malaysian courtyard, and that you probably know much better than me. And for example, this is a typical occasion of contamination with different functions. So in the same small building, people is living, and the courtyard has become a food court instead of building, a restaurant in a different box. This is another contamination. This is a building, a very famous building in Utrecht, in Holland, where on the top of a bar, so the bar has been built, and the top of the bar is used as a basketball place. So it's very important because when you talk about nature, you want to preserve nature, that it means that you've got to pay very much attention of the land use. Or contamination can be also at a very different scale, because the way we live will change so much that you can also contaminate like in function. This is a wardrobe, that there is a bath. Of course, it's a bit of a provocation, but it's very strong to understand that also in small-scale interiors you can make innovation. Then you've got contamination with languages, with different habits coming together. Like, for example, this image I show you here, it looks like a house, but it's not. It's a shop in Paris, but looks like a house because it's been refunctionalized in a old house and became a shop. Or this one that looks like an underground art graffiti. It's a showroom for Converse or Star shoes. So things are very much mixing the one with another one. Now I want just to show you very briefly some examples of what I'm saying. These are very strange things, a bit of extreme things, but just to make the concept very clear. This, for example, used to be a bombshell. Do you know what a bombshell? When there was a bombing, people used to recover, to avoid bombing. And it's been there from the Second World War, and it's been transformed in a disco pub that is perfect because it's underground, no noise, because it was a bomber shelter, so it was completely protected. And it's very interesting. And this one, the people from Vienna might know it. In Vienna, there is this museum quarter that is a huge area with new and old building mixing. And this is a bar made out of a void. So the situation before was the one you see on the top. So it was a useless space covered that in the changing of the way of living of the city, of course, when it was built, he had his own proper function, but things change, the cities moves, it's a living thing that keeps on moving, and it had become just a void. This void has been completely closed and refurbished and to become the bar of this museum. So this is a typical reconversion of an empty space. This is another way of doing it. This is an ex-monastery in Spain. As you can see, it's a heritage, very much historical site that's been transformed in a kind of hotel, residential hotel for tourists. But the way it has been done, as you can see, it's very peculiar because there was basically no intervention on the historical thing. It doesn't matter if it looks a bit, kind of destroyed, but that's what happened. So to leave the things as they were, it's a trace to maintain the heritage, but transform it because its older function was not necessary anymore. So with the insertion of the new shell, new connection, new doors, it has been transformed into a touristic place. This is another, and this operation, most of the times, they don't have anything to do with the value of the building itself. So it's not, they can be done, even if the container itself, it's not valuable, it's not a monument. Like this one, for example, it's in Rotterdam. Rotterdam, it's a huge port. So all the warehouse of the old port huge warehouses, has been transformed. Of course, the city has been growing and growing and growing, so at a certain moment, the port had moved a bit more far away, and so left in the city center a certain amount of warehouses and empty containers, and this one has been re-transformed into a cultural place. There's a bar, a restaurant inside, and is kept. This is very famous. It's a museum in Paris. It's Palais de Tokyo, and it's a classical way of approaching. It's a very important museum. It's about contemporary art, but the building itself, it's nothing special. It was just like a building, and on top, this is a government museum, but there was no time and no money to rebuild and refurbish from the inside. So they decided to take everything away, as you can see, and to make some little operation from the inside. So the ticket office has become to be a small container instead of, make another building. So again, trying to put together things and mix in and use it what we already have. Another very strange thing, this is in Vienna again, and it's a passage. So it's a structure that you need to go under a big crossing. It's a huge street crossing for pedestrian. You've got like a passage underneath. And for some reason, it was not necessary anymore. And so, again, has been transformed into a nightclub. Again, perfect because it's underneath, so it's very good because it's not disturbing people around. That's another one. Again, it's a bomb shelving. This is in Beirut. And it's a tremendous structure made of steel, and that really represents even the bad of the remembering culture of this place. And again, it has been kept as a shell and refurbished from the inside to meet new function and new needs of the city after the war. But this can be done also in very small scale. You've seen probably a lot of experiments that have been done in the last year about containers. This is a Japanese shop that decided to use a container, then they cut it out a little bit of windows to look inside, to have a moving shop. Because that's another thing. So maybe it's handy to have a shop that can be, sometimes here, and then they can be movable to be in another part of the city. Or this one, it's a Freitag. It's a very popular bag that a lot of people has here. Do you have a Freitag bag to show? The basic idea, this is the bag. What's special about this bag is the idea was to reuse the coverings of the trucks, after they get old and dirty, they take them back, they cut it, they make bags, and they sell them for a lot of money to Giacomo, for example. And this basic concept of doing object with reuse of material that has been dismantled, it reflects also in the way they construct their flagship store. That is basically the same thing. Containers, we've got tons of containers everywhere. After they've been used, one on the top of the other one has shaped this building. That is the flagship store of this company. And this is another example, very strange, because what's actually happening in the United States very much is that when the petrol was very cheap, and everybody got a car, and everybody loved driving around, they built outside the big cities in the States this huge like commercial center, like containers. They are basically made out of nothing. You see, it's the one on the top. They've got no shape. They're just huge boxes with a lot of shops inside. But then happened that we had, the petrol slums. So we had the crisis. Petrol is very expensive. There's a lot of traffic. We don't want to drive. I don't want to go shopping, driving anywhere. And so this first thing that is happening a lot in the States, that it's going to come to Europe, not yet, but it will, it gave us a lot of huge, immense boxes completely empty, with no one happening inside. And this one was transformed by the local community into a design school, the College of Art and Design, for example. This is another quite shocking one. It's in Maastricht, and of course, it used to be a church. It's still a church, but of course, it hasn't been used as a church anymore. And what these two architects decided to do, it's a library. But the very nice thing about this is that the library itself, it's posed into the old church as an object, but it didn't touch at all the existing church. So as you enter into the architecture, you still feel proportion, You can still feel the church and the design and the project proportion and feeling, but still you've got a new function to make this place live. Because sometimes, you do have a lot of churches, of course, and we do have a lot of churches as well, also in Europe. Sometimes to have people go visiting, it's not enough to let this building live, because building have to live and to be supported, and it costs a lot of money. Even if no one goes there, it still costs a lot of money because they need to be restored time by time. Maybe I'll make it here so we can have a bit of a discussion, because it's kind of late and I've got, still a few examples, but I hope it was kind of clear what I was meaning. Thank you.